Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Chad Peters of Ridgeline Minerals. Hello, Chad.
Hey Peter, how's it going?
Very well, thanks. Nice to be talking to you. Had some good exchanges back and forth on Twitter recently.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for the engagement, the activity, and the responsiveness. Some really good quality technical content coming from you and the company here. Very important to really understand these details too.
yeah. On
And
Twitter, I actually get to talk about rocks a little bit, so it's fun.
who knew that people on social media care about ins and outs of mining
Yeah,
exploration projects like this?
yeah. I wouldn't have guessed, but turns out to do.
And even if they're not, your named investors, the people that are mentioned in the presentation deck here as the big names, there's a whole cast and crew of thousands out there who
You,
are following along and paying attention, and
you
we
know, I
really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you.
yeah, I've quickly learned that Twitter is one of our better avenues for getting the story out half the time. Like I can't count how many folks that I've engaged with on Twitter, and then I get a private message like, "Hey, I bought shares. This is cool. Got to know the story. So yeah, we're trying to stay on top of it.
A big shout out to Alan Barry Lubican too, Rocks and Stocks podcast. You did a conversation with him earlier this week. I listened to that and was impressed. Quality conversation.
That was a fun interview. Yeah.
I had fun listening back to it and studying the Coeur Rochester mine plan, and some of the numbers that I saw in there. I was very surprised.
I think you know more about Core Rochester than I do now. Yeah, you were.
Well, someday, maybe we'll go through it together and we can study that technical report together and have a look at their dollar a ton mining costs and their $6 NSR rock and their pit
pretty
plan.
pretty
And
incredible how cheap they can mine for. It's almost mind blowing that they're even they're just moving dirt with a little bit of silver and gold in it, but they make money at it.
we call it a pit, but it feels like something else, because it's so shallow and it's so extensive laterally that
Yep.
it's it, it
Probably the only way it works is because for them they're able to keep their strip ratio pretty much at like zero, or 1 to 1, kind of thing, and then low grade. So yeah,
well, but if a mining bull market hits, right, and gold's up, silver's up, everything's moving, all of a sudden that thing goes way
yeah,
in the money.
that's it.
um, Thinking about some of the technical diagrams you published so far and stuff too, and the faulting and some of these exposures at surface, near surface, and then studying that Rochester report. That to me is like, okay, where's the path? Where could this go to?
Yep. We're
Good.
trying to get people to realize that that there's serious potential to scale this thing up, and like not every single drill hole is a huge win, right? And it's trying to get that across to shareholders and stuff like that. That defining a resource, defining a discovery, even you're gonna miss. If you don't miss, you can't define the edges of it, right? So it's kind of like trying to show people that we're doing a very systematic approach. You're testing the different anomalies, you're testing the faults. Some are gonna hit, some are gonna miss. What we're seeing is a far greater hit ratio than miss right now, and I think that's a big, at this early stage, that's pretty important.
I appreciate the talk of the flow sheet as well and the Rochester example there. I wasn't so much aware of cyanide circuits for gold and silver oxide like this. Still some stuff I got to learn about with all that. And
Yeah.
maybe just a question for you here about, oh, we went for, looking for gold and we found a silver deposit. Is that just spin or is that legitimate?
No, it's actually legit. So we felt we were onto a discovery even in phase two, right? And so, we very, probably our shareholders would have loved it, but we could have put out a new discovery after the phase two, right? And said, hey, we think we're onto something, but we really wanted to make sure we felt there was a ton of silver, and we wanted to either get into the gold core with phase three or prove that the silver kept on going, right? And in this case, the silver kept on getting better. And so we said, all right, we'll call a spade a spade. It's a silver deposit with gold credits. And, I think, we've been trying to push that whether it's silver, whether it's gold, there's value in it, right? And so that's been, I
Well
think, the
done.
reason we made the change. So
Stunning to hear about the $600,000 and 20 odd holes, and how far
yeah, why don't
you've been
I'll
able to
show
move
you.
it.
I'll show you
Well done.
some. Yeah, like why it's like when you look this whole area here, we put about 600,000 into that. Since we picked up the project, right? So incredibly low cost discovery. That's largely in part to being very careful about how we spent our money and also being able to utilize that drill contract. So we were drilling for, I think phase 2 was 10.50 a foot. Phase 3 was about give or take, I think $19 a foot direct drill cost, kind of thing. So incredibly cheap. Like, we're drilling in those cases, we were drilling up to 1,100 foot drill holes in phase 3 just to get all the way through the system, right? Make sure we weren't missing anything. So, yeah, it's been.
And with RC, that's 1,100 feet with RC.
Yeah. No, we're able to, we have rigs and my partner has rigs that can go up to 3,500 feet deep with just RC. So, we can go after any one of the projects we have, but in this case, we can go pretty shallow. So,
and, there was something about the details of that original deal with the driller there that I had missed. And, them as a founding shareholder and paying in shares kind of for a certain amount of drilling.
Yeah.
So, do they have a preference of, well, we want to take this, those deep targets, Chad, we really want to get coring down there, or, or is that how much discussion, negotiation, like how do you make those decisions?
What,
to put that meterage?
Steve, my partner's a beauty. Like him and I worked together for years, even before we started Ridgeline together. So, he's open to whatever we throw at him, kind of thing. He'll say, all right, we'll do what we can, kind of thing, whether it's a deep hole or a shallow hole, but certainly the shallow holes are tailor-made for this contract, right? Like he's, the more footage he can drill in a day, the cheaper he can drill, right? So that means that, if we drill a 500 foot day at Selena, we might drill for $9 a foot, kind of thing. Whereas at Swift, we can certainly drill still at half the price of what it would cost off the market, but it might cost me $30 a foot for that same day, right? Because it's, considerably deeper, there's groundwater, it just costs more to drill. So yeah, I mean, it's the more money we can put into Selena, the better, the more bang for buck we get.
So, and the core logging and the delays and the cost, the geologist time, effort that goes into that versus chips, you can get a lot of information out of rock chips. Really, the interpretation's a little bit different. A lot of Canadian geologists don't seem to want to play ball with RC, but wake up, guys. It has its use, and this is one of them.
Yeah, it's a good tool. Like I think core is by far the best, right? Like without a doubt, you want it. If you're defining a resource, you want to be drilling core, at least for a portion of it. But we're above the water table. We're not worried about contamination, and it's one of those things where you use it as an exploration tool. You poke holes all over the place until you find that honey hole, and you start expanding on it, and then maybe you want to bring in core holes, right? But in this case, I was able to drill twice as much footage for roughly the same price compared to going in with core, right? So we didn't make a real bona fide discovery, I'd call it. We didn't want to go that route until we drilled hole 21. So we would only been able to drill maybe 9-10 holes with core, so we wouldn't have gotten to that discovery if we didn't have that RC. So we're pretty excited. And I mean, we've only tested, you look at this image here, we've tested a whole bunch of these soils anomalies. That one actually hasn't been tested. We're excited about that next year. This guy here, we've really just tested, this is where the trenches were up in this area here. That's where those trenches start. That's where the whole system comes together. We've only tested the high grade, call it surface soils anomalies, and we're hitting on almost every hole. So what we're excited about now is, pretty much my red outline here outlines pediment or, shallow gravel cover sitting over top of this system. That will subdue, and that comes all the way about there. That's going to subdue your soils anomalies. So we're actually getting quite robust soils, big plumes of it here and here. But they look like they're lower grade, but that's not the case. They're just being subdued by that shallow gravel, right? So we're really excited to come out next year and test along. The strongest part of this trend appears to be so far looking like that, right? That's what the core of what we've defined. This right here is like 3 times the size of that anomaly, like from a consistent scale, So we're pretty excited to test that next year, but I can show you what that cross section looks like.
Well, just to comment about all the topography and the relief and the shapes of things, and what's the surface feature indicating for faulting, and what's that related to mineralization. There's all those kinds of really interesting technical questions that come along with exploration undercover, and beautiful big faults moving around in here. It's a great project.
Yeah, that's the primary ore control is those faults, right? And then what you have is these northeasters that are kind of looping in like this.
Beautiful.
That guy right there, that one's there, and then we got another one that cuts right through. So I'm drawing a lot of lines on here at this point.
Oh yeah, but I love it. No, it's perfect.
So if you notice, look, fault intersection.
Yep.
Other side
Yep.
of the
Another one over there. Another one over there.
fault intersection, fault intersection, fault intersection. I can do it all day long. Every time you drill them, we're having some success with them. So it's just finding that right. And we've drilled, we're drilling some pretty good grades. 90 grams per ton silver equivalent over 36 meters here at in this area right there. We're trenching, I think 38 meters of 114 grams equivalent over at trench 4 over here at surface.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, I mean, we're getting consistent grades, but at some point we're going to tag into, I like to think we're going to tag into a higher grade core to this system, right? As soon as, we just got to find the right structural intersection at the right post rock, and it can really blow out, because we have rock chips in this project all over the place. From here, we have anywhere from 1 to 6 gram per ton rock chips comfortably. A lot of them at surface, it goes all the way down to half a gram or nothing at all, right? But we're getting a lot of high grade in that area. And then you go down to the old juniper target, we call it, but right down here, we're rock chipping. We've rock chipped up to 16 grams gold and 1,500 grams silver at surface, right? So
why haven't you not gone back there yet, sir? Please.
we're trying to figure out the geology on it. That's the thing, is these things are still complex, and at the early stage, we're trying to figure out the geology. So,
Chad,
yeah.
Chad, you're not a geologist anymore. You're the CEO of a junior. You're not, the geologist for this company or that company anymore. You got to make those tough decisions about, okay, we don't know enough to go over here and really, it's tough, because if you go there and you miss, does it kill it? I'm not talking about drilling over there. I'm just saying go follow up on those chips.
Oh yeah, no, when we're doing that, but yeah, you're right. Like, you go over there and drill with a half-cocked drill hole that doesn't make sense, and you miss, you sterilize it in everyone's eyes, right? And we actually drilled a few holes over here that we got into the edges of it, didn't hit the full part. I mean, hole 10 bottomed in, I think it's about 10 feet of 0.97 grams gold and 49 grams silver, give or take, something on that line. So we were just getting into it, bottomed the hole in it, didn't look all that impressive, and that's why we're going to be bringing in an XRF next year. We're going to have a handheld XRF for everything. So before we shut a hole down, you zap every single chunk. If you get any pops of arsenic and antimony, which are consistent with grade, then you keep that hole going, because these things can pull you. So yeah, that's definitely a priority down there, and but we want to understand it better before we start.
Well, in the workflow, those XRFs, you can use those with rock chips too, like from surface, not just RC chips, but hey, we saw cut this and we crushed it and we dried it. Here you go, like XRF numbers on it. Exactly. In terms of real time, fast feedback, very essential. Glad to hear you investing in that piece of equipment. I was chirping at you on Twitter about getting a passive seismometer as well. Very useful piece of technology. It's it's very, I understand it's pretty simple to use, and it's point based, so you go to a bunch of points, you can string together a grid. There may be some challenges data work wise, but really valuable for understanding some of the faulting potentially here. Like, imagine if you had a high resolution 3D seismic here.
Oh, for sure. No, and we're working on, those are all things that come with time, right? For the first step was like, is this project worth a damn?
Yes.
We think it is now.
Well, and so that's the question, I guess, too, is like, from the market's perspective here, do people, are you flogging a dead horse, or?
No, I've gotten incredibly positive feedback from my core shareholders and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, we're pretty small. I got a big group of folks that have been in the mining business for a long time. So I really relied on their feedback, like, hey, what do you think? We're excited, but and it was, consistently very strong feedback, and like, hey, obviously we want to see it grow, but this is a really good first step. So yeah, we're going to be working on a lot of those different things. But I mean, this thing, if you take a step back just for a second, I mean, when you kind of do that, this whole area, really,
on a property scale basis,
the only spot, and this is just 10 kilometers of our 33 square kilometer, like this is just a zoomed in shot, right? It's too big of a property, but like it looks like, oh well, maybe that's dead, right? Well, not in our eyes. What we're seeing is consistent grade. Once you get under the cover, you're seeing consistent grade in those things. So, every time you get these fault intersections, you're getting, even if there's a fault intersection here, all the way through here, all the way through here. So I'm drawing all over the place here, but we're excited about what the potential could be. So
I love it. And I love the map too. Thank you for that. Thank you.
No worries. And I mean, you look at this, this is just a 3D image, right? That's another fault intersection. So it's pretty simple. It's not like this is groundbreaking stuff. It's just, I don't think, when we first came into this project, we looked at it as a gold play, because it was getting up to 16 grams at surface rock chips. You're not going to, it's high oxide grade, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people looked at it the same way, right? And so if you're looking at it as a gold system, it's good, but it's not great. kind of thing. But you factor that if you look at it from a bigger picture and you go, okay, well, what about if you look at it just from a silver and gold perspective? Suddenly you're talking about a gram per ton gold equivalent type kind of grades that you're drilling, right? Like, 35 meters of 84 silver equivalent. That's, right at a gram essentially, and then we drilled 37 of 90. That's, I think, 1.07 grams gold equivalent at today's prices. So it shows a lot of potential. And
a lot of those numbers, though, those numbers are like 80-20 gold, aren't they? Like it's pretty gold heavy on those gold equivalent.
some of them have, I'll show you some chip trace. Some of them are pretty strong with the gold, right? So it's not that there's not a good gold component here. And the beauty of it is when you got a strong gold and silver component, depending on metal prices, you have flexibility both ways. You're not reliant on just one, right? Like a gold only project, obviously silver typically goes with gold, for pricing perspective. But yeah, if you're in a gold only or silver only project, you're 100% reliant on that. Whereas we got a little bit of, we got robust numbers in both.
Any surprises, that you've announced, really looking at this view? Like this was a section from the recent news release. Was there anything in this that we know yet that's, other than the continuity?
Are you asking for material information, Peter?
No, I'm just saying interpretation wise, like looking at this section, was there anything in the geology where things, on
Yeah, there was less offset on the, the Gilmet limestone starts more like there instead of, I haven't had a chance to update the model. So, cool. Minor stuff, litho contacts moving up a little bit. But no, I mean, it's surprisingly staying pretty consistent. I think the big surprise has been the silver grades. I mean, 21, you look at, we hit a big fault right here as well. So right at 18, it looks like there's a northeaster. It's kind of coming across that we didn't. And if you notice, it cuts right across a break in the soils anomaly, right? And so it comes through here, lopped through 18, and we think it partially offset the zone, cut it off. So like 18 looked interesting. I don't think it's going to potentially return maybe as strong as 19 and 21 did, but that doesn't mean that that zone isn't there. It just could be that, it's been offset over here or it's been dropped down, and so those are the kind of things that, when you get into when you start delineating a resource and really getting heavy into it, that's when you're able to pick out, okay, that hole missed, but we don't think it missed because the zone's dead. We think it missed because it got offset by a fault or whatever, right? So like 14, it hit really well. It's on the, it's up here right at a fault intersection, breaking that anomaly between the northwestern and northeaster. There's another fault intersection right there. 16 is between those two, and 16 looks like it's pretty good, kind of thing. It hit gray, or it hit, we don't have the grades back, but it hit the same looking red rock right where we expected it to. But then we drilled on the other side of that fault there, and 18 and 17 look totally different. So we're trying to figure out, there's all that kind of jostling and faulting going on that, one or two drill holes just can't capture what's fully going on, right? And
this is phase 3, right?
Yeah.
21. So these 20, 21, 19, these are phase 3. So, and what you're saying, similar to phase 2, phase 1 in terms of structural layout.
Yeah. The overriding geologic model is holding together incredibly well. And what we're seeing is just little fault offsets, little changes that maybe you wouldn't expect, but they're common in every single deposit, So, and we stepped, we're doing really wide space drilling, right? Like if you go up hole 22.
Yeah. What is the distance there? That's
about 650 meters.
Good for you.
So,
good for you.
In our eyes, if you're looking for an open pit gold mine, it better have some scale, right? So the fact that we drilled those holes and what we hit in 22 looks encouraging. It hit alteration in the same general areas, right? So we know this system is very laterally continuous, and next year, you got to be punching a bunch of holes across. You start pegging holes all the way across it, right? And
that's the other thing, because I know there's another section that we had in prior news releases, and we have the broad similarities, the geology things, and so it's this thing about Nevada and continuity, right? And being the real challenge, and people, there's high grade oxide here, high grade there, but stringing it together. So the pivot towards a little bit more of the silver focus to carry things, it's all fitting together for me. But there's a lot of information, you've published a lot of good sections and things like that are really helpful.
And this is what that looks like in 3D, right? Like, I mean, that cross section is actually cut directly from our 3D model. And what I got right here is silver on the trace, and I can go and turn off. I can turn off the silver. That's so arsenic is right down the tube, and then silver is on the edge. I mean, look at how arsenic corresponds with grade. right? Then if you look and you can turn
Well,
off.
and look at that fault too. That's just beautiful.
Yep, fault cuts it off completely, right? And then you look at antimony on the tube instead. Let me turn all these off. Dun, dun, dun. There's antimony, right? So antimony is even tighter to the grade. So you got silver grade popping out, antimony is right there. When you look, and I think what you're going to end up seeing is, whoops, meant to notate on there. That didn't work very well. Turns out.
And those are 100 gram per ton silver bars too up there. Those purple ones plus.
Yeah. So we're talking pretty significant stuff, right? And then if you pull out, we'll go to take out a 3D. When you look to
beautiful.
Getting used with
beautiful
my mouse here, trying to zoom out. But there's up right here where my mouse is. That's where the trenches are. That's all those rock chips, so the white ball or the different colored balls. You can see how much farther it extends up past those trenches, right? You still
go up slope on that. Yeah. I love it.
There's up the slope right there down at the juniper area, right?
Well, and the dip of your intercepts too. Your target horizon. The stratigraphy you're going for is with the hill. It's
exactly. So it's
and the Rochester report. When I was studying the Rochester report, I was like, oh God, I've seen this before.
Well, it's a setup for a beautiful, like when you have it gently just going down the hill and into the valley. Your strip ratio is incredibly low, right? And at the end of the day, when you're doing low grade rock like that, well, it's not even that low grade, but when you're looking at an open pit, you got to have the strip. And if it starts 300, 200 meters down and goes down to 500 meters, it needs to be 5 grams per ton to make it worth stripping all that material off, right? So like our hole 22, it's out here, right here, kind of thing. So that's, it's a measure from hole 22 all the way up to the trenches.
Yeah, that's like 2 clicks, or
it's a full click, and then you can go another half click past that up where you're still getting 2 gram per ton rock chips, right?
Yeah.
And but it's eroding up the hill. So by the time you get up to the top there, there's only I would say there's maybe 30 feet. There's 10 meters of material that hasn't been eroded off. As you get down the hillside, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker till you get to about your full thickness of 35 meters, right?
But that's an assumption too, and there could be post-mineral faulting that stacked those things. All kinds of weird things could have happened upslope there. That's could have some surprises. You put a hole down, you hit something below that you didn't expect.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting to us is you look over here. We've drilled a lot of holes. We've trenched. We've all this stuff. And then you see the same relationship, same thing going on. The juniper fault cuts all the way. Let me turn off the geologic model quickly here, just so you can see. Just trying to make it easier to see. Yeah. So that fault cuts all the way down through here, right?
Yep.
You're seeing the same relationship tracking up the hillside, except the grades are they're way higher, right? Problem is we went and drilled a couple holes down there in phase 2 without fully understanding the geology, and they didn't come back with what we saw to the north, right? So once we figure out what's going on with fault offset there, it could be that's maybe even a better part of the zone than.
Do you have soil or rock chips, any surface geochem in between these two kind of lines?
Yeah, we do. Let me,
okay.
I'm going to have to show you because I don't have it into my 3D here. Let's see.
Well,
there. How's that look?
Can you see? Right. Because
so down here that's where we're getting all those, and those high grade rock chips that track up the hill track all the way up into this anomaly.
Well, and I wonder between the AA prime and BB prime lines, in that upslope, when you go upslope there, how much coverage do you have geochem wise in there?
Like kind of in this area here?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's rock chips, and what we've seen is, all the way through here, we get little rock chips, 0.05, 0.5, 0.3 grams gold, decent silver, 20 grams silver, all the way along this fault zone, right? All through here. And what happens is you need to have a fault intersection to really have a blowout. So in this case, you have the Stars fault right here, the Juniper fault, Tyrant, and Max, right? That's why and then there's this guy here that kind of makes this nice little area.
Yeah.
We have the Orem fault is right there. Problem is something is happening offset from a structural perspective at Orem that we don't have happening at Stars. So we haven't figured it out yet. So that's why these holes, which are all actually nestled in one little area, we haven't figured it out yet. But the fact that we were rock chipping that high grade, and then we did drill 10 feet of almost a gram and like 40 grams silver, shows there's something going on. We just got to figure it out.
Would you do more geochem around 15 or is that?
We'll do some prospecting and rock chipping, but to be honest, I think it's the drill bit at this point that's going to really start moving things forward.
Maybe some geophysics to try and give you a sense of faulting or something.
We already have gravity and so that gravity is how these, between mapping and gravity, it supports all these faults that we have in here. So I think the basic geologic model is there. Now it's a matter of you just got to start it, go in and start drilling it, right? And
Okay.
that's kind of the main thing. I think that's what the baseline work we've been doing for a year and a half has been getting all that together.
Good.
What
I
I'm
didn't
really
know about the mag, so thanks for mentioning that.
No worries. It's, you can't show it all or we'd be here for 2 hours, right?
Again,
not
Chad.
again. We're not doing it again. My wife said we can't. I got to go home today. So, this is hole 21, for example, right? That's on the discovery hole, if you want to call it that. But look at how, one thing I want to point out, look how thick, like big the chips are. They're big, like and why they are is they're silicified, right? That's why we're getting, you look between here and here,
Yeah. The 195 silver number.
That's running almost 3 grams per ton gold equivalent across that area, right? And so when you see those big deep reds, really, really dark reds, really silicified, that's where you're going to get those big silver numbers. And that's a respectable gold number there too. It's averaging about 0.45, right? So, and then what's really interesting too is, you look to the next section, this is that 600 meters to the north of that. This is where we've really started to tie it together. And that's why we kind of included that in the press release. Because like you got the system starting at surface, you're rock chipping. Trench number 4, that's 4,300 GT. Like there's a significant metal component to that intercept. It's at surface. We can walk right up there and knock chunks off of it still, right? It's
do it again.
Open. Yeah, and then you get down, and every time you get into a fault zone, you get a blowout, right? So it starts getting bigger. We'd want to, obviously, now that we're understanding the system, I'd want to come back from hole 7 and drill another hole right across that. You're going to get a more true thickness across that fault, drilling it now from that other side. But that's why on this program, we're now drilling from the other side. And like the important thing, like the last hole we drilled along strike hit 4.6 meters of 560 grams silver. Right, silver equivalent with an including of 3 meters of 828. So that's 10 grams gold equivalent. Just to put it some perspective on there, less than 100 meters below surface. So like there's a component to this system that is high grade, and it's going to take drilling to sort it out. Right, lots of holes. Keep defining it, and when you look over here, this is getting over towards the Maximus fault, which is the next parallel fault zone, and it looks like this. It's right about there. The Chainman is actually the host that produces all the gold out of the Kinross Bald Mountain Mine and the Alligator Ridge. That is the host we want to be in. If we can prove there's a big soils anomaly sitting right here, if we can prove that there's a zone that looks just the same, but it's 400 feet shallower, suddenly we're really, then it's really on, right? Like then we have, shallow gold in a new host rock. We got the deeper system, the system in the Gilmet that we've already defined that has serious potential already. But if we can bring this into play, then we can really build ounces pretty quick. So, we got assays pending on 22. This is where we hit altered intervals within that. So, consistent with, what you'd expect to see, kind of something like that. We brought this is the first hole that ever drilled the Joanna in our programs, which is a limestone. It's not in a great host, but we did hit alteration and silicification there. I bet it's going to run really low grade probably, but it's going to run. And then I think, if the Chainman had continued up through here, I think we would have hit a zone right there, right? And it would have been really great. But obviously it's been eroded off. So that's why we got to move to that next parallel fault zone.
Yep. Stepping out to the west, southwest.
Exactly. Go west. That's where we need to go.
This section, Chad, just...
Yeah, we like it. And
it's a beauty. And you study the Rochester plan and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah, great. Very, very similar. But then what you just said about Bald Mountain.
Yeah. Bald Mountain produces 150,000 ounces of gold a year. I don't even know what their silver, I don't even know if I'm sure they report on it, but that's a gold specific mine. It's in the Chainman, right at the Chainman and the Joanna contact. And regionally, that is the best gold host that's known in the area. So we haven't even tapped into the gold host and the trend. We've just, but we started with what we could see, which is, you got great trenches at surface, and we started working our way from known to unknown, right? So we know what we got at surface. We've worked our way through to here. Now the next step is really stepping out and trying to prove that, the Chainman is now alive as well, in which case suddenly you have multiple stacked zones.
And would you anything about Wild Theory's genetic model, remobilize stuff from there is responsible for what you're seeing at Chinchilla?
It's, it's pretty much, it's kind of a classic Carlin type model from the standpoint structurally. You got these faults, you got stratabound bleed out, you got some units that are cap rock, and you got some units that are receptive so you got limestones covered by shales, right? So the darker blue MDP, That's a great cap rock for the gray limestone. Same thing goes, when you get into this shale here, there's actually a bed within this shale that's not very permeable, right? So when you get into the bottom of that brown chainman,
Nice.
it becomes a really great, between the chainman and Joanna contacts, you got high permeability with a cap rock on top. So that's why, so it's, for what we see and what we've been used to, this is a classic Carlin type gold system. The only thing that doesn't make sense at this point is, why do we have so much silver? Like, typically you don't get this level of silver here. And it's as you get farther along the South Carlin trend, South Carlin trend, your silver component goes up dramatically. So you still see it as Carlin type systems, but they're transitioning, and that's part of, you got the systems are being emplaced at a shallower depth. Back 30 million years ago, they're being emplaced, near surface, or roughly 500 meters down. Whereas the deposits to the north, in the North Carlin trend, they're gold rich. They're being deposited 4 kilometers down. Different pressure temperature, different host rocks, different source rocks. So you just get this kind of, like I said with Alan, nothing forms in a vacuum, right? Like, these things are all dynamic systems. And, as they transition and get, as these magmatic ore bodies, or these magmatic zones were sweeping across the state, it dramatically changed the chemistry of these systems. And so they manifest differently, right? So,
and so what's the target rock type over here where you have been drilling at Chinchilla and stuff like that? That's a limestone?
That's a gilmet limestone. It's an okay host on the trend, but it's not great, kind of thing. Typically, like, that's the thing, is that's why we're excited. Cause, like, man, if we're drilling what would be considered the Snickel frets, kind of thing of host rocks, and you're still getting really great, robust grades, imagine what we could get if we can prove this system exists, but out in the chain, right? Which is actually the true host rock. Like, even Fremont Gold, I think they drilled 50 meters of a gram per ton gold at the Chainman Joanna contact back in the fall, right?
Beautiful.
They weren't able to follow up on it, unfortunately, but on additional, drill holes of that same tenor, but it shows that that's where you want to be from a lithologic standpoint. And then you just got to find the right structure.
And so it's the continuity again, right? And understanding structural features. How do you feel about all that, working undercover out there to the west?
Well, the good thing is just the model has been holding together so well that we're able to use the gravity, the mapping, and just a lot of our bedding contacts and stuff to actually tie it all together. And one thing to point out, we can map, there's a ridge of Joanna limestone that's silicified that runs all the way along that fault zone. So we've been able to get structural readings there. There's a ridge of silicified chainman on the Maximus fault. We can get readings there. So we can get you can get an idea of dip. You can get an idea of what's going on. And then you look, like, where we want to drill next. Beautiful. Along that trend is right here, right? Like, that's almost half kilometer long, subdued soils anomaly, right? Because this is, like I said, this is all alluvium through here. Shallow gravel. It's subduing and that's probably why maybe it wasn't noticed historically too, right? Because you look at that and you go, okay, that's 100 ppm silver, or arsenic, which is actually pretty significant. But back in the 90s and stuff, when they were doing stuff, they wanted to see 400 or 500, 500, 600 ppm arsenic at surface. So
it's the story of undercover. The next discoveries are undercover. This is the era of our.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look to hole 14. This is, hole 14 is right here, right along that fault zone. It was our best hole in phase 2, about 2900 GT hole. And, you look again, you can see immediately where the grade picks up, right? So you got, it's right in with the silicified stuff. It's red, it's, hematite, all kinds of sulfides, but it used to be sulfides, they've been oxidized. But again, you 196 grams right there of 0.5, and then you see all the way across here, it's just consistent gold and silver grades all the way through, right?
Yep.
So you can, when you see it,
bottle roll testing. Yeah, that's
what we're going to do next. So, we're seeing 81% gold and 74% silver with our shake test right now, the cyanide solubility testing. That's very preliminary. Bottle rolls, it'll go down a little bit. Column tests, it'll go down a little bit more, right? As you refine yourself in there. So, ideally, you'd want to see something that you'd probably want to see the gold leaching in the 70s, and we'd hope that the silver would be leaching in the 60s, which is still incredibly good for the kind of grades and shallow material we're seeing. So, and then you go down into the next one here. Look at this. The zone just cuts off. You're going through here, you get out of this red stuff, and bam, it's done.
Amazing.
So
yeah, it's amazing.
You can really get a feel for the grade distribution pretty well with it. So
Thank you for showing some chips that, we can actually make sense of, right? Everyone thinks, oh, you got to have core to have interpretation. No, no, thank
Well,
you.
if I'd love to have core, we'll have core there next year for sure. Like we definitely will. But yeah, the chips
RC
are,
for grade and core for structure.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, like for now, the RC is allowing us to really spread out, which has been great, and then we'll come in with core and kind of infill.
Can you go back one slide, please, to see the hot
Yeah.
chips there?
Yep.
So I'm seeing 196 silver, 0.5 gold, 20, um,
15 and
so
60.6,
so I'm
10,
just trying to think
26.
about what that is in proportion to your gold equivalent, your silver equivalent calculation, right?
Yep.
So you're talking about an 80 or a 90 factor to convert. So, that 190 silver, call it 2 grams gold, and then you 0.5 gram gold. So yeah, so that one, there's a lot of silver coming through some of these, and the other 96, call it 1 grams gold equivalent plus 0.4 gold on its own. Like there's
Yeah.
the silver is carrying it. I was concerned if like the silver was, if it was the gold that was really carrying most of the metal value
If the
in some
gold
of
was
these hits.
if the gold was carrying it, we'd still be calling it a gold deposit, right? And that's it. We looked at it and we wanted it. Like I remember I was talking to Dave Cole, and he's like, "Well, what are you going to do next after phase two? It looks interesting." And I said, "Well, I think once we get through this high grade silver halo, I think we're going to get into the gold system." And he was like, "I'm struggling to see the problem," kind of thing. And that, I kind of was like, "Oh yeah," you kind of think about that, and you're like, we were so focused on finding a gold mine that we had the blinders on a little bit through the first. We knew of the silver, but we were convinced that we were still going to go out and find a high grade gold system. And what we found instead was high grade silver with a pretty robust gold component to it still, right?
And it makes sense with what you're saying about this mystery of why is the silver there. From a Nevada perspective, it's somewhat unusual, or I can understand not wanting to latch onto that if it doesn't quite fit the mold.
Silver doesn't typically leach all that well in Nevada either, right? And that's, like if you look to the Pinion deposit, which is, 80 kilometers to the north of this, similar deposit style. I mean, you look at that and their silver component only leaches at like, I think it's around 30-40%. So, and even in cyanide solubility testing, I believe that they were typically seeing, in the 40 to 50 cyanide solubility. So we're seeing 25 to 30% greater than that in cyanide solubility. So, usually silver doesn't leach well. So you always are like, you get a high silver hit and you're like, oh, that's all well and good, but it's never going to be, you're not going to be able to mine it. But in this case, what we're seeing early on is showing that there's potential to actually, to have this thing be a leachable system.
Appreciate always color, from you on other projects in the state, and comparables. What's good, what's bad. That's my own interpretation, but just the facts. I always appreciate the facts from you about stuff that I don't know. I just ask about that chip tray we were just looking at. Like it seems like the pieces of rock there are like a lot smaller.
Yeah, it's a good observation. So in 14, we're not, as we've been stepping down the hill, it's getting progressively stronger and stronger, right? More silicification, higher grades typically, other than a couple of those standout trenches up on the hillside. But the reason that's smaller chips, it's a little less silicified. You look up to hole 21 where we really knocked into the heart of it, really high grade silver. Look how big those chips are. They're they're 3 times the size. It's because of the silica content. So the silica content goes up, your grade goes up accordingly, and it gets into that more rubbly look. Whereas when you're down here, this is still really well mineralized material, but the silica content is a little lower, and visually it's that's why it does that. So I mean, and you look to, and it's pretty consistent throughout there. And then, you look down to this is our GT map. So, silver equivalent grade times the thickness of the intercept. And this is a really great metric, I think, for kind of making an apples to apples comparison of one intercept from one company to another intercept with another, right? Is, a meter of 1,000 grams is the same as 10 meters of 100 grams from a metal content perspective, right? Now, economics, of course, make both of those totally different scenarios. But in our case, we're seeing incredibly strong GT intercepts. You can see on the left here, and we got over 9, 11, 13, 14 intercepts of greater than 500 GT. And when you break those down, multiple intercepts greater than 1,000, greater than 2,000, 3,000. That's why we waited as long as we did to make a discovery. Because our board member, Lou Teal, he worked for Newmont for 25 years. And I said to him, what to you constitutes a discovery? And he said, well, you need to have a minimum of 3 potentially economic hits that tie together in a geologic context. They can't just be scattered all over. They need to make sense. They need to tie this zone together. Yep. We took it a little, we had those 3 hits after phase 2. We took it that next step. Now we got roughly, we're closer to 14 intercepts that kind of all tie together. And we really wanted to just be able to walk out and just say, yes, this is a brand new discovery. And you look to this GT map, and, the reason that it's not pulled down higher is because, we need assays from here. We got assays pending from here.
Yeah, I could just imagine what that's going to look like when you update that, if it all goes well.
It can materially change, and like I said, there's a big fault. This fault right here rips right across beautiful. This fault. Yeah. It buggered up the hole. I don't know what happened. I don't know where it is. But, we'll go back in. We'll have to do some more drilling around 18 to really figure out what's going on. But, these holes look good. I think we're going to see stuff, come up and do like that, right? And it's going to get even bigger. Yep. And this is where that big soils anomaly outcrops right here. You get more good drill holes. Suddenly this anomaly can get real big really quick, right? I mean, at that point, I see something happening like this, kind of thing. And it suddenly starts getting, pretty big. And that's the whole goal, right? Is showing scale, I think.
And those are kilometer bars that we're talking about. So, that shape you just drew, that could kind of fit in a 2-3 kilometer square box.
Yep.
And, if you have a 3 kilometers box square either sides, you can fit a very large pit in there.
That would be a very large system, yes. And obviously we got a lot of drilling left, but what we're seeing is what we're really excited because every hole we drill, the model's still holding together. You have little surprises like over here with this fault and stuff, but that's expected. But we're really excited about the continuity. And I mean, if we start hitting stacked zones along the chain contact, which roughly looks like this, if we start hitting stacked zones in here, kind of thing, all through these zones, then you have the 2 to 3 kilometer box, but you have tonnage stacking on top of it itself, right? So
what does that do for you with Swift though, and Bell? These other ones that you have, does that frustrate you in terms of not being able to chase some of those deeper targets at these other projects? Or
no, we're still going to chase them. I mean, that's the thing. Okay. Is Selena's exciting. We're going to definitely continue advancing this thing, but we can do it for really cheap. Like I can put, $500,000-$700,000 into this thing next year and drill the same amount of holes I drilled this year and really start blowing it out with a $3 million or so budget next year. That means that we can advance this thing as if we put what would be the equivalent of $1 million into it this year. We can put another $1 million equivalent into it next year, which really only costs us $700.
Torque.
And that's then leaves
torque, man.
Yeah. And then on top of it, Swift is still my favorite project in the entire company, right? They're all my babies, but I like Swift the most, kind of thing. And, so Swift has that potential where if we can prove our model, we're talking, multi-million ounce, the kind of things that the Barracks of the world go looking after, and
and the kind of thing that produces a news release where everybody in the market's like, "Oh my God, Ridgeline Mineral," It's not like, well, you have to explain it about it.
So Selena can add a ton of value really quick for us, and I think it's going to become a very core part of when people look at the value of our company, which currently at I feel at $17 million give or take. I mean, we're heavily undervalued.
Well, and there could be, a transaction or something pretty quick too, because somebody else is going to be able to, markets buy your stocks, but the majors buy your projects. And what you've been doing here is the kind of work that will probably lead to people being interested in a major way.
Well, we're just trying to show that we're doing good geology, right? And I mean, this took 3 phases and 22 drill holes. Swift is on phase 1, drill hole number 3.
Yeah,
things take time, and as a small company, you have to advance them in what you think, what we think is going to add the greatest value, allow us to continue raising money at higher valuations so that we can keep doing, pretty much, when someone says, "Hey, I want quick and dirty results," and we say, "Well, that's not how we do exploration," right? That's I'd love to give quick and dirty results and get that stock up, but that's the quickest way to wasting money and just putting holes where they shouldn't.
Well, false expectations and a bunch of hot money in the market. No, we don't want any of that. No.
So we caught a lot of flack, earlier in the year just because we didn't have a lot of news flow from October and November. And it was because we were drilling these holes. We weren't willing to put out results until we felt we had cohesive story. And in this case, we pushed holes 19 through 21 through the lab quicker. Not because they're the best holes we've drilled, but because they gave us we could come.
They're the most important. They're the most important for this story.
It shows the most continuity with what we drilled, allows us to tie to what we've already seen over here. So that's why we push those through, right? I mean, we're still excited about what these other holes are bringing. We're excited about Swift too.
Almost a 2-kilometer step out from that hot trench.
Yeah. I mean, you look over here; it's well over 1.5 kilometers. This was over a 650-meter step out here. They're all
beautiful.
They're all hitting. That's a kilometer right here, and there's all this room.
It occurs to me you almost sold Selena before. So
no, we don't need to talk about that now. I mean, when we were
all these old stories are great.
Selena used to be, Selena truly was my it was our 3rd ranked project at the time, right? I mean,
watch you sell it for $50 million in 2021, and all of a sudden Ridgeline Minerals isn't financing it anymore for a couple of years, guys. See ya.
Right? But we're open to any deal that adds value, right? Like, but we're not gonna, did we expect to find a potential silver deposit? We didn't, but we're also not going to short sell this thing because we're very quickly seeing how potentially quick it can scale up. So
the shales too. That's such a great story. And that's a conventional story. As much as this has been a difficult story, even for a Nevada audience, what you're talking about with the shales there to the west as a more conventional story could be enough to push this one over.
Well, yeah. And I mean, all it takes is, for us, this is where you start getting into the shale on the other side of hole 22, which is right over here. Hole 22 is right here. The shale kind of comes in right about here. And
beautiful.
Surprise, that's the contact of the shale running all the way along here, right? So you're getting the gold and silver rich fluids flowing up the Pathfinder elements. And right where there's a fault intersection right here. This is my favorite target on the project right now. That's right in it's 400 feet shallower than our drilling in holes 19 through 22. And I mean, a lot of those are 45-degree holes, right? So you drill a 45-degree hole, the true vertical thickness of depth of that intercept is far shallower than the actual downhole thickness. So, you look at our chip trays and it says 700 feet. Well, that's not 700 feet vertical beneath surface. You're stretching it way out. So I think for us, we're trying to tell the story to shareholders, make sure they understand the significance of what it could be. We're not trying to blow smoke up anyone's ass here. Like this, like we're not going to promise this is going to be a silver or a gold mine, but for early days, it's showing a lot of good potential. And all you can do is just see what the model brings for you.
I love it, and I love that area you circled as your favorite spot, because again, that's almost a kilometer away from the collar on 21.
Yeah. Yeah, 20 minutes. It's right. Yeah, it's roughly, you're talking 500 meters
600 meters, something like that. Yeah.
You're 600 meters from 22. This right here is also really exciting because it's subdued, right? But this is the area between this fault right here and this fault right here. We've got great drill hole in 14, 16 nicked into 16 nicked into the edge of it as well. 22 looks positive. Again, we just need to see what these results come back with. And, this is covered by alluvium right there.
So vertical holes on a grid, is that in the cards for you guys yet, or are you still?
The next step would be, you got to just come in and start plugging through here, right?
Really?
So what we'll do first is
but you have so many ideas to test on a big scale before really doing that micro work.
Yeah,
let somebody else pay to define it. But
I want to show scale, right? Like at this point, you got to be able to show that it has the potential to be a mine first before you start delineating what that mine actually looks like.
Well done. There you are, Mr. CEO. Respect. I'll take my hat here.
So we'll drill angle holes here. We'll drill some more angle holes through here to show that these faults are the core parts of it. And then once you finish those angle holes, that's when the boring, you start coming in and you just start plugging holes all the way through this thing.
Well, and the one thing I'll say though is, like, sometimes I watch these guys who get to the later stages of resource definition for like PFS level work, and they go and they do this hole down the throat of the thing right in the middle of the pit, never drilled around it, never drilled a vertical hole quite like that before. They're always blah blah blah, and it's the best hole that they've ever hit.
Oh yeah,
and it always just like makes me wonder, like, I know it's a boring hole, but like, if it's sometimes when those things surprise, I wish that surprise could have come earlier in the project timeline, because that story you told me about, that time you were involved in a discovery, stock went up, and then, the company did all the definition work and ultimately sold it for around the price of where the market cap went on the discovery. That story stuck with me a lot too, is, the need to be quick and speed and hungry and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that, at the end of, like it's tough, because when you sell something, when's the right time to sell? I think there's never a right answer, kind of thing. And people, especially, myself included, it's easy to be an armchair quarterback and say, oh, they could have sold it for more, but there's so many factors that go into a deposit. There's so much risk that goes into developing an asset, right? And
opportunity cost. If you're doing this, you're not doing something else. But if you're drilling drilling Swift right now and you have this cooking away.
Yeah.
It's best of both worlds for you because you have your big thing that you want to test, you know.
We're doing the swing for the fences kind of stuff at Swift and Carlin East and Bell Creek. Those are the kind of projects where you hit a good hole and then you're talking, you know, huge valuations, right?
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. But you know,
but huge budgets too, though. Huge budgets.
And this is something that's very realistic. I can drill all summer long at dirt cheap prices and really build value, right? And I think the whole goal is to get people understanding that this isn't just, you know, Selena's not our only asset, Swift's not our only asset, you know, and so
and it's the pathway too. It's having strategy. And I'll say it again, like the ability to have a transaction on Selena, you know, to fund the expensive work on Swift or something like that. Like there's a potential for a lot of things to go right for you here, Chad.
Well, and we're also looking at new stuff, right? Like look at Selena, for example. It was owned by Newmont. It was owned by Placer Dome. It was owned by Nevada Pacific, owned it for years. McEwen used to own this entire land package, right? But it was, for them, I think it must have been 40,000 acres. It was a massive land package with, you know, so how in the world can they effectively explore all of it? So, you know, I don't blame them that they dropped it. When you look at it from a big picture perspective. And so when we came in, you have to start with the baseline work, because unless we'd trenched, unless we'd done the soils, the gravity and all that mapping and rock chipping, we never would have been able to figure out that this system was a covered system. You know, it looks like it just outcrops its surface and then it's not all that, you know, it kind of peters away when you're on the hillside here, right? Like it's not very thick. But when you get into the covered system, it's been preserved. It hasn't been eroded off. Everything on the hillside has been eroded away, mostly, right? There's still, there's still 100 feet.
That's where the starter pit is.
Well, there's still 100 feet of material, which would be like five benches, right? So it's not like there's
couple
not
years.
Yeah, but you know, it's tough. It's easy to get, like, it's really tough to talk economics and all, like this is still early stage, but you know what? But we're looking for, you know, it's at surface. It shows that it could get big, and there's definitely grade there to support it, right? And if we can tag to, you know, some more, you know, in this area, some more 800 gram per ton silver stuff. I mean, that's suddenly you go from, you know, that really helps your economics at shallow. So I think there's pretty good potential.
And having comparables, you know, it is really early stages and we can't talk in any reasonable way, but at the same time, you have to be able to have that view of what it could look like on a development pathway.
When you're talking about spending $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million, you need to be able to try to draw some comparison and say, well, I don't know what it is, but if
it's not 2 million. If it was 2 million, you know, like how many, right? Like,
yeah. And then, so, you know, like when you're looking at doing that, you got to try to peg it to something, right? And say, well, if we're right, it could be this, or, you know, and
the bang for the buck you guys get is very impressive. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's working for us. So, you know, it's, I mean, drilling is really the only thing that drives value, right? Like all the work that we did beforehand, you know, the mapping, the prospect, all that
sets
stuff.
It up.
Yeah, but no one gave us value.
Nobody cares.
You know, you go in and say, hey, you know, what should we be worth? And they'd say, you're worth nothing. You're literally worth nothing. You know, like this idea is just an idea. So until you put, I think, you know, trenching and drilling onto it, it's just an idea, right? And it's, you know, the project's just a liability. So you have to be drilling a lot, or else you're just holding on to ground and paying land payments, right?
There's no point in some bulk tonnage, like mini bulk sampling stuff around some of the hot spots. That's not really the scale concept that you want.
Not at this stage. That's something that we're like, we're not intending on taking this thing to production. Obviously it's not our model, you know, like usually good exploration geos don't make great production geos, right?
Yep. And it's a bulk tonnage target anyway. So, you know, a mini bulk sample's a joke at that point.
We'll show scale, we'll show grade, and leave some upside for
some recoverability studies as well mentioned. So
do metallurgy just to show that any group coming in goes, okay, I know the tons are there, I know the grade's there, and there's reasonable confidence that the gold's going to come, silver will come out of it.
They've got a checklist, and you know what it is, so you want to reverse engineer it.
Yeah, as good as you can for as cheap as you can, right? So
well done. But are there any other slides in this section?
I think, you know,
I think we've been through it front and back.
Yeah, we're pretty much covered it. I mean, I had the grade distribution here of our GT for silver, and then that's what the GT for gold looks like. So it shows the same trend. It's just way smaller. So if you looked at this as a gold project, you'd be like, you know, it's just as gold only. It's like, okay, there's continuity, but it's not huge, right? And then you suddenly look at it from a silver equivalent perspective, it gets a lot bigger. So so that's we're hoping to grow that footprint next year.
And is that just you know, how much of that is a factor of just the gold? Because those are like the same shells almost, just with different levels of.
Pretty much we use statistics to break out the different, where are we breaking our GT breakouts, 10, 25, and 50 for gold equivalent.
Yeah.
So it's different breakouts. It's essentially
Okay.
using different metrics to define what that is, but because it's showing is gold is consistent with silver. Silver's just much wider, right? So, your gold grades are there, your silver grades are there, but it's only when you combine them together that you say, okay, this thing actually has some serious potential.
And there's no way to go from the gram meter number to net smelter per ton, NSR per ton.
Not with my skill level, maybe.
Well, but when you go to gram
analyst,
meters, you take the tons away from it.
You take the tons out. Yeah. Then it's purely at that point, kind of a metric that you can use to compare apples to apples, right?
Yeah. On a metal basis.
But you were looking, I saw you on Twitter there and you said, that 90 gram per ton rock, that's worth about $65 a ton, right? And that's a fair assumption. And I think usually
I didn't have a recoverability, maybe you take 70% of that, it's $50 or something like that, $40. But the NSRs on Rochester were $5-$6.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to be, typically you want to see a minimum $25 a ton rock. That's gonna cover your mining, your leaching.
Yeah.
Usually 25 per ton rock on a low strip pit with decent recoveries. That's going to be an economic mine. It might not be a barn burner, but it's going to, you're going to be able to make money at it. You start getting into the $50, $60, $100 per ton rock. Those are huge margin deposits, right? So,
yeah. And the thing with Rochester that stuck out to me so much was the shape of the pits. It wasn't these big deep pits like we have in BC with these porphyries. It was this really shallow terraced work going up slope and just scraping off, and the similarity between what you have on your project and that area.
Yeah, these are different types of deposits, right? It's all about where the right host rock bed intersects the right structure. So what you end up with is usually a lot of laterally continuous grade, kind of thing over wide intervals. You can get them going for a couple kilometers, but they're not huge. They're not vertically huge, right? Like it's not like a porphyry where you're going to drill 500 meters of a gram. Now you do a couple mines in Nevada are like that. You go to, Gold Strike, Cortez Hills. Those are world-class mines though, right? But on average, most of the mines in Nevada, kind of thing, you're going to get that terraced look. They're coming in and
Round Mountain's pretty deep too, I think.
They're mining for those exact beds, but Round Mountain is hosted in an intrusive, in like a Riley. So that's more of a disseminated ore body with fracture controlled and veins, whereas this is more of the strata-bound Carlin type.
To the northwest, I see a couple holes in the wash, but then there's that arsenic. Any plans to go? That's your C prime line, maybe down the.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, there's really good potential as you go undercover. We actually don't have soil data anywhere after this, right? So, cool. And they drilled a lot of holes back there in the 80s. What we're realizing is they did a good job. They tagged most of the anomalies, right? They were going after them. The issue is they weren't drilling deep. Old reports, we're trying to track down the historic data, but old reports say they were drilling 100 to 300 feet. Which a lot of times, here, you weren't getting into the zone until you're 350 feet down hole. Now, maybe it's 200 feet vertical depth. But point is you would have missed the system if you were drilling 100 foot.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder if there's another one of these B prime spots with that hot trench upslope to the north.
Yeah. So the sonic target, I don't have it just again,
wild.
From a scale perspective. It's exact same. They drilled about 20 holes out there. We know that they drilled, I think they drilled on a report at 50 feet of 0.3 gold.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the kind of gold grades we were drilling. And, down here, and it shows a similar, all these faults just come right up and they continue up into that, right? So Beautiful. There's another parallel zone up here. And, we just got to start working towards it, right?
Another 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer step up for you. Yeah. Good stuff, man.
First step is getting this defined. That's really exciting all the way down. And then, coming up, testing out these areas here. There's lots of potential. So
well done. 1 rig, 2 rigs, keep it simple.
1 rig for now. And then, we probably get a core rig and an RC rig going at the same time. It really just depends on what the results go, right? If it's worth spending the money, we'll just keep adding rigs. So.
And camp wise and stuff here, this is not, all your projects, you are in Nevada.
Yeah, no, there's a high county road that runs right there.
Beautiful.
It's 1.5 kilometers, I think, off of our property boundary. And we camp down there in campers and in travel trailers and stuff during the programs, and it's fun. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
That's all I got right now, man.
I appreciate you taking the time here to go back and forwards with me here. It's a lot of fun.
It's fun. I could talk all day about the rest of the projects, but I think that's just an interview for another day, probably. Right?
No, the first one we did back in September, it must have been 2 hours or something like that.
Almost 2 hours.
What a marathon. I really enjoyed that too. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun. Yeah. No, I think we're doing better today. We're not as far.
Keep it short, keep it tight. But we go into the weeds. It's really where all the, getting off the, trying to ask some helpful questions for people who are trying to figure out whether, because not everybody has access to you.
Well, it's impossible to capture this in a press release, right? So I can show you a press release. I can put images up on the site. We have our verify model, which we got to update. It's way out of date. But, it's different, right? Like it's tough to, I think when I'm able to walk through this kind of stuff with you, it allows you to kind of get into detail why we're excited,
Well, and it's the ongoing conversation too. People can come back a year from now and look at this and hear what you were saying and then see what you did. That's always, really important for me to.
Yeah, no, exactly. So,
and all the social media stuff, I appreciate you being active on there too. That's a lot of fun. I look forward to more talk back and forth, and with all the characters out there, it's really colorful place. I don't see a lot of Nevada people on Twitter yet, but I will be watching for them.
My wife got me onto Twitter. I didn't have an account till August. Like, honestly, I didn't know how to use it or anything like that.
Who needs it? You don't need one really, but in terms of being able to seed out little bits of information and have these discussions,
there's some awesome, there's some of that, to be honest, I prefer a lot of the kind of call it analyst work that a lot of folks just do on Twitter over what I see is from paid advertising and people that are at, coming from the big institutions a lot of times. And those people do really good work, but sometimes it's a little bit more raw and you can kind of dig into things when you got someone just going straight at, they have no agenda, right? They're not being paid by anybody. There's no, so Twitter's been pretty helpful for that for sure.
Yeah. And I'll mention here too, this is not sponsored content. I'm doing this. Yeah, I do not have a commercial arrangement with you guys.
Yeah, we don't.
I do it because I like this story and I think it's a really good story that I want to be involved in helping to tell. So there you go.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you. Till next time.
You got it. Cheers.